Hey guys, it is Tyler here, back once again with another Assassin's Creed Valhalla video. Today, I wanted to give an update to a previous video I did about the old school settings you can put on for Assassin's Creed Valhalla, or settings to make it feel old school. And in that I talked about having stealth down on easy and free running being on the right trigger, so that when you're sprinting it just feels like that old school feel. It was always the right trigger in all the old games, so it just, have that connection. It feels a lot smoother, especially because the sprinters stop and start, as well as, of course, to have instant assassination on. Now, I've changed up my whole control scheme, and I talked about it on the recent As Always podcast episode, and I thought, let's give an update. I've been getting lots of comments of people asking, okay, what are my settings now? What are my settings now? So those are mostly setting based. This is going to be more button layout. So here, I've got Avor, and I'll run you through my button layout that I've changed to just make everything feel smooth. And it's actually made me enjoy things I didn't like about the game, like the combat, a bit more than I did before. Just the way the buttons are laid out a bit more simply. Now, because there are a lot more settings in Valhalla than there are in previous Assassin's Creed games, a lot more gameplay mechanics with your longship, with raiding, with the combat and your abilities and all that sort of thing. There's a lot more buttons to press. So to make it feel old school, but also balance with, you've got to have buttons somewhere. There's some things that maybe aren't as intuitive as others, but it kind of complements the fact that your free running can be on your trigger, and your combat buttons can be on, depending on your console, but I'm on the PlayStation 5, on your X, your square, your triangle, and your circle. That's where I want my combat, that's where I want my assassinations to be, right? So in the old school way, so let's go through it right now. So if you head to your controls and customize controls, you can see the basic mechanics here. Now, I've left my melee abilities on the right trigger, so you hold the right, R1, not the right trigger, the right bumper, or R1, and then you've still got your triangle, circle, X, and square. For that, your range abilities, you leave your bow, same as always, left trigger and right triggers to shoot, so hold the left trigger to aim. Here's the thing I've changed mostly, is with your attack. So your light attack, your basic hit, and an assassination when you're undetected is on square or X on the Xbox, which is the same as it was in all previous Assassin's Creed games, mainly the Ezio trilogy and the Altair era. The Desmond era, that was the button you press for assassinations. The heavy attack I put onto triangle, so they're right next to each other, square, triangle, easy. Your left hand defense, so let's say your shield, that's on circle. So your block is circle, your dodge and your roll is on the X. So all of your combat moves are on these four buttons. Your light attack, your assassinations, your heavy attack, your block, your dodge, your roll. They're all on these buttons here. That's the way I like it. Now, what I did was, because before your parkour to swim up or parkour up or climb things, it was on X or A for Xbox. So I changed the sprint to right trigger, but then it just got a bit confusing when you have dodge and roll on X. It conflicted. So I just changed, if you hold right trigger, it also makes you parkour up. That's not like previous Assassin's Creed games. It's more like the more modern games, but at least it's on the trigger. It still feels smoother to do that. But the thing was, you still need a drop down button of some kind. So I put that on the left stick, the left analog stick. So I did that to drop down, and it's also to crouch. So like a lot of games that you're playing, like for example a shooter, if you're going prone or crouching, a lot of the time, like in a Halo, it's your analog sticks you press down. So I thought, let's do the same on this. If you want to crouch or drop down, it's the left analog stick. So I had it. It's not the most intuitive. It is for crouching. It's not as much for climbing down, but there's not that many buttons we've got left at this point, so you need to climb down. Now, when it comes to your interactions, you're talking to a quest giver or having any interaction with the environment, collecting berries or resources. I did try it on X, but when you have dodge and you roll on your X, it gets a bit hard. And I wanted to keep combat on the four main buttons. So I made primary interaction L1 or left bumper. Not super intuitive. That's the least intuitive thing of probably in the whole control scheme. However, you get used to it. It's just your basic interaction with anything. I just hit L1, and that just gives that its own thing to connect with. You call your Raven, you call your Mount, I haven't changed. It's the same. Now let's go deeper into the control scheme, hey? Like I said, you parkour up and you swim up is your right trigger. Your dive, crouch, drop down is right here on L1. Or left analog stick, sorry. Left analog stick. Let's click that down. Your sprint, your lunge, your gallop's also on the right trigger. Or R2. Follow the road, river, square. Don't really ever use that. So I haven't really worried about that. That'll be conflicted. You'd probably end up throwing an attack when I hit square, and this won't work. But I never used it, so it's fine. Open sails is X when you're riding the longship. That's totally fine. All that's the same. Switching stories, all fine. Doesn't make a difference. Your Raven, haven't changed anything. Doesn't make a difference. Now here's your fighting. Square works. For your light attack, it's also to follow road, river, and your ability 4. None of them conflict. They're all good. Heavy attack is triangle. I don't use smoke screen, so I haven't even worried about that. I haven't even worried about that. Hasn't been an issue. Ability 1 doesn't conflict because you hold R1 when you do it, so it always works. Assassinate square. Perfect. Smoke screen, haven't used it. Left hand action. Works fine. Your aim is your left trigger. Well, L2. That works fine. And shooting's R2, but it's also your sprint. But if you're holding the left trigger and then do it to shoot, it's fine. There's no conflict there whatsoever. Dodge rolls X. All good. Works perfectly fine. Your abilities work good. Your main character stuff. This is the one that's the least intuitive of everything. Is the L1 to be your interactions. I'm used to it now. Works totally fine. To dismount. Now, this is the important one. I chuck dismount and everything on L1, so it's all the same. Dismount and release objects. But that ends up conflicting, especially when you want to raid. Because it'll make you just dismount the ship and not initialize the raid. So they need to be separate. So I made sure dismount and release an object was on R1. So that didn't have any conflict, especially on the longship to start a raid. So that's when I'm dismounting a horse. And then to get on the horse, it's L1. To get off is R1. Easy. Everything else is just fine. Those are my main button layout changes. Just makes combat easier. I hit square as the light attack. Hit triangle for the heavy. And if I'm in stealth mode, I can assassinate with the square. X is dodge. Circle, block. Which is very easy to jump between both in the combat situation. Just way more intuitive, way simpler, way easier, and it also feels like the old school style with the square being your attack button and your assassinate button. Super important to me, especially when I hit the right trigger then and you start sprinting and parkour. It just makes the game feel way more intuitive with the control scheme and way more old school. The only thing you got to do is sacrifice some less intuitive control buttons, like your left analog stick to be crouch, which actually is fine. It's more in the sense of when you're climbing, you need to have a button to then climb down with. And you want that to be your left analog stick too, which is your crouch. That's how you get down. That's probably the least intuitive. And then your L1 being your interaction with the environment. Collecting berries, talking to a quest giver, anything like that is L1. May seem unintuitive, but that's something you easily get used to. Because it's something you're usually doing just on its own, right? You're just going to click the button to interact with someone. So it's just the one button. It's better to have it that way, whereas you have your combat buttons where you need to be using multiple buttons in a combat situation in quick succession. It's way easier to have them all next to each other on similar buttons that make sense to you, where you associate that button with that action. Whereas it's easy for me to then just press one button to pick up some arrows and loot. Super, super easy. Super easy. That's my current control scheme. Keep your instant assassination on. Keep your stealth at easy. And have these controls, and it will feel the most old school it can possibly feel, ladies and gentlemen. How's your control scheme? Obviously, you can sort of customize how you want, but this is to avoid things conflicting. I've been working on this control scheme for tens of hours. Using it, adjusting things when I ran into troubles if things didn't work or they conflicted. This control scheme works, ladies and gentlemen. It works. For the way I play, it totally works and feels like an old Assassin's Creed game. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it helped you. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. And ladies and gentlemen, I will see you all next time. Goodbye.